long time holding my peace. I have been still and refrain myself. Now I will cry like a woman in labor. I will destroy and devour at once. I will make waste mountains and hills and dry up all the herbs. And I will make the rivers islands, and I will dry up the pools. And I will bring the blind by way that they knew not. I will lead them in paths they have known. I will make darkness light before them, and crooked things straight. These things will I do to them, and not forsake them. They shall be turned back. They should be greatly ashamed.
Good day. Welcome to the Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing our study today in the book of Job, chapter 15. So, let's hear the reply of Eliphaz the Temanite. Then answered Eliphaz the Temanite and said, should a wise man utter vain knowledge, and fill his belly with the east wind? Should he reason with unprofitable talk, or with speeches wherewith he can do no good? Yea, thou castest off fear, and restrainest prayer before God. For thy mouth uttereth thine iniquity, and thou choosest the tongue of the crafty. Thine own mouth condemneth thee, and not I. Yea, thine own lips testify against thee. Art thou the first man that was born, or wast thou made before the hills? Hast thou heard the secret of God, and dost thou restrain wisdom to thyself? What knowest thou that we know not? And what understandest thou, which is not in us? With us are both the grey-headed and very aged men, much elder than thy father. Are the consolations of God small with thee? Is there any secret thing with thee? Why doth thine heart carry thee away? And why do thy eyes wink at? And what do thine eyes wink at? That thou turnest thy spirit against God, and lettest such words go out of thy mouth. What is man, that he should be clean? And he which is born of a woman, that he should be righteous? Behold, he putteth no trust in his saints. Yea, the heavens are not clean in his sight. How much more abominable and filthy is man, which drinketh iniquity like water. I will show thee. Hear me, and that which I have seen will I declare. Which wise men have told from their fathers, and have not hid it? Unto whom alone the earth was given, and no stranger passed among them. The wicked man travaileth with pain all his days, and the number of years is hidden to the oppressor. A dreadful sound is in his ears. In prosperity the destroyer shall come upon him. He believeth not that he shall return out of darkness, and he is waited for of the sword. He wandereth abroad for bread, saying, where is it? He knoweth that the day of darkness is ready at his hand. Trouble and anguish shall make him afraid. They shall prevail against him, as a king ready to the battle. For he stretcheth out his hand against God, and strengtheneth himself against the Almighty. He runneth upon him, even on his rock. That's a really bad reading. I said I need new glasses. Actually, this works better. Push him out to the end of my nose. He runneth upon him, even on his neck, upon the thick bosses of his bucklers, because he covereth his face with his fatness, and maketh collops of fat on his flanks. And he dwelleth in desolate cities, and in houses which no man inhabiteth, which are ready to become heaps. He shall not be rich, neither shall his substance continue, neither shall he prolong the perfection thereof upon the earth. He shall not depart out of darkness. The flame shall dry up his branches, and by the breath of his mouth he shall go away. Let not him that is deceived trust in vanity, for vanity shall be his recompense. It shall be accomplished before his time, and his branch shall not be green. He shall take off his unripe grape as the vine, and shall cast off his flower as the olive. For the congregation of hypocrites shall be desolate, and fire shall consume the tabernacles of bribery. They conceive mischief, and bring forth vanity, and their belly prepareth deceit. Read a little more. Then Job answered and said, I have heard many such things. Miserable comforters are ye all. Shall vain words have an end? Or what emboldeneth thee that thou answerest? I also could speak as ye do, if your soul were in my soul's stead. I could heap up words against you, and shake my head at you. But I would strengthen you with my mouth, and the moving of my lips should assuage your grief. Though I speak, my grief is not assuaged. Or assuaged, sorry. Assuage. And the moving of my lips should assuage your grief. Though I speak, my grief is not assuaged. And though I forbear, what am I eased? But now he hath made me weary. Thou hast made desolate all my company. And thou hast filled me with wrinkles, which is a witness against me. And my leanness rising up in me beareth witness to my face. He teareth me with his wrath, who hateth me. He teareth me in his wrath, who hateth me. He gnasheth upon me with his teeth. Mine enemy sharpeneth his eyes upon me. They have gaped upon me with their mouth. They have smitten me upon the cheek, reproachfully. They have gathered themselves together against me. God hath delivered me to the ungodly, and turned me over to the hands of the wicked. I was at ease, but he hath broken me asunder. He hath also taken me by my neck, and shaken me to pieces, and set me up for his mark. Itchy eye. His anchors compass me round about. He cleaveth my reins asunder, and doth not spare. He poureth out my gall upon the ground. He breaketh me with breach upon breach. He runneth upon me like a giant. I have sewed sackcloth upon my skin, and defiled my horn in the dust. My face is foul with weeping, and on my eyelids is the shadow of death. Not for any injustice in mine hands. Also my prayer is pure. O earth, cover not thou my blood, and let my cry have no place. Also now, behold, my witness is in heaven, and my record is on high. My friends scorn me, but mine eye poureth out tears unto God. Oh, that one might plead for a man with God, as man pleadeth for his neighbor. When a few years are come, then I shall go the way whence I shall not return. Oop, there's another chapter. That's all right. We won't get through 16. Eliphaz has a lot of interesting things to say. Now, again, one of the reasons people don't like Job is because even though they say true things in here, they feel uncomfortable quoting it because of who's saying it. So it's like when we talk about the Bible being the Word of God, it's like, well, what do you mean exactly? I mean, it's meaning, to me it means, well, God wants it all to be there for a reason. But what reason that is not necessarily obvious. I mean, and I don't know. Job seems to be quite a very interesting book. It has a very, long look at this subject. But the people who think like there's something wrong with it, it's because we have this notion that's not very different than this. Just like the prosperity gospel. If it isn't going right for you, you're not doing something right. You're not tithing properly. If you were tithing properly, you'd be rich. If you were giving to the right ministry, your seed you planted would be multiplied. Godliness is not a way of material gain, though godliness is of itself much gain, but not in the material world. Even though, from some people's perspective, yeah, it does pay off. Having a good reputation in the world never hurt anybody. So being godly is not there's no downside except that when sometimes you're called upon to stand up for what's right when the world is going wrong and it can cost you your life. I really liked what Job was saying, and it definitely was messianic in its outlook. Especially when he talked about, they gaped upon me with their mouth. And right there, all of a sudden, I was like, yep, the Lord. They smote me upon the cheek. Remember, they slapped him. God hath delivered me to the ungodly. Yes. What shall I say? Father, deliver me from this hour, but for this hour am I come into the world. Who sent him into the world? The Lord sent him. God sent him into the world. The Father. He is God also himself. God the Father, whom he answers to. So, let me go back. Should a wise man utter vain knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? The east wind, from what I understand, from what I read, in their experience, it was like this hot, dry wind. There was, not didn't bring rain. It was it's kind of like the hot, dry wind that means like ain't gonna rain, because this is like the east wind coming off the desert. Whereas if you think about it, where they were in Palestine, the west wind would be coming off the Mediterranean, and that's where your rain's going to come from, generally speaking. Maybe south too, also, but not from the east. And so, it has some sort of metaphorical understanding as being this sort of like filling your belly with the east wind is, and here's the cool thing is like, if you're not sure what it means, you don't have to trust me. You can just use the context here to understand it, because it was like, should a wise man utter vain knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Well, it probably means something like uttering, the consequences of vain knowledge is what? Well, something vain. And that'd be like the east wind, a wind that is not going to bring good things, but rather bad. And you don't want to fill your belly with badness. You want to fill your belly with goodness. You don't want to fill your mind with vain knowledge. You want to fill your mind with good knowledge. And you certainly don't want to utter vain knowledge. It's interesting that he says vain knowledge. What does he mean by that? Well, sometimes knowledge is vain in the sense that, like, it's not useful in the context, right? So, like, something comes up, and you say something that's true and wise, or maybe or whatever. It's knowledgeable. It's true, but not useful. So it's vain. I've often talked about how I used to memorize all the names of the kings of Israel and Judah, and the lengths of their reigns. Actually, that was the secondary part of it. That was the part that was, whatever. I was trying to extend it. This is part of, this is when I was a young Bible study student. I was trying to learn the scriptures and know more about them and have a lot of knowledge at my fingertips, But a lot of that is knowledge basically to impress people. It's useful to some degree to know all the kings of Israel and Judah. It's more useful to know, like, if I name a king, that you can say something about his reign and whether or not he was a king that pleased the Lord. Not that that's that important. As a Bible teacher, it's useful to have that kind of knowledge. As a Christian, well, it's more important, like, that when you read the books of the kings, you should extract the lessons from those experiences, just like the prophets in the New Testament as well. I don't think memorizing scripture is as critical as understanding the message. Of course, I think that should be without contention. The message, the content of the message, not just the value of the words, because that's why Jesus spoke in parables, so that they'd have these words, but they wouldn't understand. Well, we know what he said, but we can't understand what he said. Should he reason with unprofitable talk, or with speeches wherewith he can do no good? I don't know if this is like his accusation of Job, but whatever. The rhetorical questions to which the answer, of course, is no. No, he should not. Right? That's what. And of course, what he's also suggesting is like, well, this is what you're doing, Job. You're uttering vain knowledge and filling your belly with the east wind, and when you're talking about all this stuff, but the real matter, what's the real thing? You have cast off fear, Job. How's that? Because he's not, once again, they're convinced, or they want to convince him on some level that he's guilty, and that's why this is happening to him. That he's committed some grave sin that warrants the destruction of his entire life. It's not like he went out and, like I said, it's not like he went out and drank too much and had a hangover, and then his friends were like, Job, this is what happens when you drink too much. That would be proper rebuke. Hey, this is the consequence of sin. And maybe Job had sins of youth. He talked about it. He's like, is God just holding every sin I ever committed against me now? Well, then naked came I into the world, naked go out, blessed be the name of the Lord. In a sense, he can't demand his life, but he also knows he's ready to be judged. He said, okay, I can't speak against God for doing this to me because I didn't have any of this coming. All this is a blessing from God. All that I've lost. And I'm bitterly unhappy about it. But I still trust in God. I trust in I trust in my God. But they're obsessed with the idea that no, you did something. And your insistence that you're upright is like you are not fearing God properly, because you understand there's none upright, no, not one. And Job hasn't really claimed that. Just that I didn't deserve this. I don't like that doctrine that people believe in, where they think that, like, they respect persons with God, as we were talking about. They will say, well, God, torturing someone eternally, of course that's an unreasonable punishment, but not if you're God. If you're God and someone leaves a cigarette butt on the side of the road, that's littering, and that's a sin. And that is a sin against an infinite God, and therefore worthy of infinite punishment. Unless you turn to Jesus, right? Unless you swear allegiance to Christ. They're saying you're throwing off fear and restraining prayer. Why? Because you're not going. You need to get on your knees and beg forgiveness for the awful thing you obviously have done. You should confess, fear God. Don't keep trying to convince us that you're righteous. We don't believe you, and God knows. Thy mouth uttereth thine iniquity. Why? It's almost like I remember when I told my friends when I first started realizing that there was something important about righteousness. Like that, like I said, I'm not perfect. I'm asking you to be perfect, but through ultimately the resurrection, when we see him, we know we will be like him. If you don't believe that, then I don't know where you are. It's like we are ultimately headed towards perfection, right? And we shouldn't be just doing whatever in this life. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. We can't live just however we want. And when we do, honestly, we end up, we think, oh, we never be like, in the parable of the Good Samaritan, we never be like that priest. Just walk on the other side while someone's suffering. And we do it every day. Maybe not we, but people do it every day. They think, I'd never do that. And then they go and do it. Because they refuse to see the suffering around them. They don't want to see it. Who wants to see suffering? You want to just go your merry way. I mean, you've got your own problems. I mean, people don't want to look on the suffering of others. They want to, and again, they always want to believe that that they must have done something to get where they are. Something where they're culpable. If they're to blame, it's their fault. Like someone's panhandling on the side of the road or whatever. I don't panhandling. They're holding a sign. They're looking for money, whatever. They say like, well, they're probably going to buy something to drink. I don't know that that's like when Jesus was like, give to him that asketh thee, except if you suspect they're going to use it for something you don't think they should. It's just a convenient excuse not to help. And I understand it gets crazy sometimes, and you don't want to just give things to people to get them to do more self-destructive behaviors. But you also don't want to use that as an excuse, so you got to walk that line carefully. I don't want to excuse myself from doing things, but I want to do things that are effective. Not just do something to make myself feel like I did something. Well, there I go. I threw a 5 at somebody. Good for me. Pat myself on the back. And he's saying the things that come out of your mouth are your own condemnation. They are the ones that are testifying against you, condemning you. And again, because he insists on this innocence. You're the first man that was born, or wast thou made before the hills? Hast thou heard the secret of God, and dost thou restrain wisdom to thyself? What do you know that we know not? What do you understand that is not in us, which is not in us? With us are both gray-headed and very aged men, much elder than thy father. Are the consolations of God small with thee? Oh, that's interesting. Most of those are pretty. Hast thou heard the secret of God? Have you heard the secret of God? Do you know what his secret is? Shh, don't tell anybody. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I'm not sure what that, what does he mean by that? And I think what he's saying is like, we all know that there's an aspect of this to some degree. God is unknown. We seek to know him. We want to know him. But if you don't understand that you don't know him, then you don't really understand anything. We don't know him. He reveals himself to us, and then we begin to know him. Right? We begin to know him. We know certain things about him. But like, here's the thing. Like, let's say I'm a big fan of the Beatles or something. I just picked the Beatles because I'm not a big fan of the Beatles, but I'll just pick them. And like, I get all this Beatles memorabilia and I get all these books on the biographies on the Beatles, and I start studying up, and I know all the Beatles and John, Paul, Ringo, and all them, right? And I got all that. I know all about them. Does that mean I know them? No, not really. It doesn't really mean I know them, do I? I don't really know them. I know a lot of stuff about him, but I don't really know him. I just know the publicly available information. And I would be unto them a stranger. So, knowing God is not just about book knowledge. It is about the way, and again, the way it's characterized in the New Testament says, how can you love God who you've never seen if you can't love your neighbor who you see? And so that's why I say it's like your relationship with God has a lot to do with the way you treat other people. Because God isn't here, but they are. And when Jesus talked about judgment, he said, hey, inasmuch as you did whatever good or bad thing you did to the least of these my brethren, you did it to me. Who are these my brethren? In a sense, when Jesus took on the flesh, we all became his brethren. He was the Son of Man. That's why he called himself that generic title. Because he was talking about being a man like us. The gray-headed men, the aged men, the secret of God. There's something unknown about God. There's always more to know. At least until he reveals himself to us. Like it says, there's going to be a time when the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God, like the waters are filling the sea. Or as the earth will be covered with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. That's what it was. Waters cover the sea. And then all will know, and will we know God to the degree like we could? Now that there are vast depths to plumb, but we will know God in a much more intimate way. Certainly after this experience, certainly after trusting in him, he certainly will be endeared to us. But though he put his love on us first, that's how we're able. It's not like this is a job, we got to make God like us. I don't mean that. But, when he says, well done, good and faithful servant, he's not saying that for nothing. We are his workmanship. He wants us to do well. Because that's his work is for us to do well. We all will do well, actually. We who are his chosen. So who knows what God's secret is? God has secrets. That we haven't yet found out. That no man has ever yet found out. Like the day and the hour of the Lord's coming. There you go. Do you know when that is? Do you have God's secret? I don't. He's revealed some secret things to me. Things that I didn't know. They were secrets to me. Maybe not secrets to everybody. I was like the interpretation of the two witnesses as being the two olive trees, the two churches, or the two candlesticks, I should say, being the operative connection between churches and witnesses, the candlesticks. I spilled on myself. Having that revealed to me I remember many times when things were revealed, it was very pleasing. And that's about what it means to know God is he shows us things. But we got to listen. How do you listen? You go to the scriptures, you read them. You listen to a Bible study. What does it have to say? Think about it later. Are the consolations of God small with thee? And I think that usually means something like, are God's consolations like not, small? I mean, you don't consider it a big deal? The consolations of God, and what does he mean by that? I suppose like that you might, if you turn and repent, if you pray to God and seek his forgiveness for your sins, he will offer consolation. Is there any secret with these? So I don't know if he's sort of doing not good cop, bad cop, but like push and pull. Like there's the consolations of God. And then, is there any secret with you? Do you have something secret you're keeping secret? Why doth thine heart carry thee away with this imagination of your righteousness, as what I presume he means there, And what do thine eyes wink at? I mean, your eyes are winking at something maybe. Like you are, allowing something to go on corruptly. That's what you wink is a sort of it can be, I don't think it's, I guess it is very often has a negative connotation of sort of corruption when people wink at each other, like the signaling. And I remember I winked at my wife once and she didn't like it a long time ago, and I was like, well, I think it depends on the intent. When if I look at my spouse and I were to do that, it's more like saying we've got like some sort of inside communication, which is not corrupt because we're married. You know what I mean? But if we were like trying to arrange some sort of deal that was like corrupt, or like we overlooking something, we didn't see that box going out the back. Don't worry, everything looks good here. There's some corruption in you, Job. That you turn your spirit against God and let such words go out of thy mouth. How dare you protest your innocence? What is man that he should be clean? You can't. What is a human being that he can even claim to be clean? Well, the law has all kinds of prescriptions for how to cleanse oneself. And that's the whole idea of religion, is how to align yourself properly with the demands of God. What does God want from me, and what do I need to do to please him? And again, the mankind is made of dust. We're dirt. We don't have any real. We have a sinful nature. But the thing is, God has made us to hope, or at least through the words we believe we're inspired by God, that there is a possibility of mercy. Like I said, the world is both terrible and wonderful place. It's a very strong contrast. Life can be very difficult and it can be very wonderful. And there's no. You can't guarantee it's just going to be all great. And God doesn't guarantee it's going to be all great. A lot of people say, no one ever guaranteed you that life was going to be fair. God is merciful. He has given us, and I think that ambiguity of the world, the fact that there's good and evil, that there is hope and despair, that you can hope, I think means that you should hope. You know what I mean? It's not a world without hope. And so you should hope not only that the world can be better, but also that God will make it better ultimately. And I know ultimately before the Lord comes, the world's going to go to its darkest place ever. That doesn't mean that has to start right now. I don't know if it's starting right now. We must always do our part to stand up for what's right in whatever time we're living in. I always believe that. That's how you end up being in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing when the Lord comes, whatever generation you happen to be in. That's why we fight the generational evil that's going on in our time now. We resist it and try to make the world a better place. To me, like the idea that like I'm going to try to do things to usher in prophecy. It's like that, tampering with prophecy, especially when it comes to things that result in the loss of men's lives. Believe me, God doesn't want us contributing to all the brutality and murder and death in the world, not Christians. He which is born of a woman, that he should be righteous. No man is righteous, no, not one. And Job hasn't claimed to be perfectly righteous, but we already know that God considers him righteous because he has forgiven any sins that he's ever committed. And Job is doing everything that pleases him. And not only that, he says the right things. He putteth no trust in his saints. And, again, this is a man trying to almost flatter God. Well, and that's what I don't like about modern Christianity too. Oh, God loves everybody. Everybody. Never mind the philosophical consequences of that. Never mind that. He loves everybody. But if you don't love him back, he's going to send you to an eternal torture chamber. So maybe you better love him. And no wonder people turn away from it as absurd. That's not the gospel that Jesus preached anyways. It's a kind of an interesting thing. He putteth no trust in his saints. The heavens are not clean in his sight. Nothing can be clean in God's sight. God's the cleanest of the clean. He's the most loving, whatever. He's cleanest of clean. He can't, nothing. Yeah, so what? That doesn't mean he's unjust. Just because man is pathetic, weak, small, doesn't mean that, for whatever Job has done in his life, that he deserves this really nasty thing to happen to him. In fact, God had been protecting him from such things, according to the narrative. He had a hedge about him, whatever that meant. Reminds me a lot of when it talks about Satan being restrained. There's a hedge. He drinks iniquity like water. We're just, we are just, water is like a life staple. We need water. We got to drink water. And man seems to have this same thing. We got to sin. People laugh about it in church. Who sinned this week? Of course, we all sinned. We're all sinners. Shouldn't be so cavalier, guys. Shouldn't be so cavalier. Just because it's true doesn't mean it's funny. Just it's true doesn't mean it's like, okay, what'd you do? It's so funny. Tell me about it. It must have been a hilarious sin, huh? I will show you, hear me. That which I have seen I will declare. Which wise men have told from their fathers, and have not hid it. Unto whom alone the earth was given, and no stranger passed among them. The wicked man travaileth with pain all his days. This is the wisdom. Bad stuff happens to bad people. Don't do bad. Johnny, don't do that. You'll go blind. Right? Bad things will happen if you do bad things. Right? You reap what you sow. God will repay. All true. But it doesn't always work out in the world. In the short term, not always, and also sometimes not even in the long term. People get away with things. And we have to trust that God will not allow that injustice to stand. That's why we believe in a judgment, because that's what fixes it. The wicked man travaileth with pain all his days, and the number of his years is hidden to the oppressor. The number of years is hidden to the oppressor. The number of years is hidden to the... Well, let's see what the NIV says about that. Verse 20. I'm just going to read it here. All his days the wicked man suffers torment. The ruthless man through all the years stored up for him. So hidden is more like stored up, like put away. But it's actually, the way they put it is like, it's like saying, the wicked man travaileth with pain all his days. For a number of years, this pain is stored up to the oppressor. Like, even if he's not immediately suffering it, it's being stored for later, I think is the implication. A dreadful sound is in his ears. In prosperity, the destroyer shall come upon him. Yeah, things are going good, right? The number of years is stored up. And then suddenly it comes due, and the destroyer suddenly comes upon him. He's comparing this to Job, basically. Job, you must have been up to something all these years. Something deep, dark, and destructive underground. Something very evil. He believeth not that he shall return out of darkness. And he waited for the sword. He is waited for of the sword. And when I first read that, I was like, what does that mean? No, because at first I assumed, I read that and then I thought, I'm like, well, obviously, if he's in darkness and he doesn't think he's going to return out of darkness by coming to the light, right? And what happens when you come into the light? Well, your deeds are reproved, right? That's what usually you expect. That sound, that dreadful sound, is the sound of the beating hoof beats of judgment, or the beating gavel of the judge approaching. Yeah, in the moment of his prosperity, and just while they're successful, boy, then it suddenly comes upon them. So he believed, but the thing is, the later references to darkness made me think that this didn't make sense. But he believeth not that he shall return out of darkness. Darkness being the idea that, like, okay, in secret, his deeds are hidden. Or that perhaps maybe it's talking about those years that are hidden, the recompense. That the recompense will come out of darkness. Maybe that's what it means. I mean, it's hidden, it's being stored up. It's dark in a way in the storage room over there. Then open the door and here it comes. Here comes your judgment. Something like that. And that he is waited for of the sword, meaning the sword is waiting for him. He doesn't believe he's going to come out of the darkness into the light and be judged of the sword. I like that interpretation the best, but we'll look at the other ones. He wandereth abroad for bread, saying, where is it? He knoweth that the day of darkness is ready at his hand. So again, now it's different. So now we have darkness here. Is it the same word in Hebrew? I'm going to check it real quick. Because that would be annoying if they had two different words and they translated them the same right there. 21. Chosek. Okay, or Chosek. Same thing. Good. Okay, so again, darkness has a lot of wide variety of meanings as far as metaphorically and stuff. Where is it? He looks for bread. He knows that the day of darkness is ready at hand. Maybe that means he's looking for food so he can go into hiding. Maybe. He knows that he's looking for bread because he knows that the day of darkness is at hand. That sounds to me like someone who's looking to prepare. He thinks he can go into hiding. He can hide from judgment forever. That's what it sounds like. He thinks he can hide from judgment forever, and that he doesn't believe the sword is waiting for him. He looks for food to store up so he can, saying, where's that food so I can, he knows that the day of darkness is right at hand. Trouble and anguish shall make him afraid. They shall prevail against, because eventually your conscience gets to, you feel like the wall's closing in, so to speak. Maybe that's what it's kind of getting at. Ideas. As a king ready to do battle. Trouble and anguish make him afraid, like a king ready to, like you got an army against you. Trouble and anguish. So he's not wrong. Sometimes this is what it's like when you do wrong. And sometimes justice is done. And we like to think that it's always like that. Right? And ultimately it is. But people want it to work out in the world like that and say, like, no, this is the way it is with God. He always makes sure everything works out. And if something doesn't work out, it must be because, well, it did work out because they were bad. For he stretched out his hand against God and strengtheneth himself against the Almighty. Again, he's accusing Job of this by because of Job's protestations of innocence. He runneth upon him, even on his neck, and on the thick bosses of his bucklers. It's an interesting turn of phrase, right? Let's see what the NIV has to do with verse 26. Yeah, I'll bring it along this time. Verse 26. Okay. With a thick, strong shield. Wait, well, come on. I guess I gotta go look at it myself. Thick bosses. The back. Bucklers. So it's like he runneth upon him on his neck, on the back of his shield. I'm not sure what that means. What did they say it meant? Defiantly charging against him with a thick, strong shield. Oh, the back being like the idea of thickness, perhaps. I don't know. Oops. The bosses of his bucklers. I like that best, though. I like sometimes when it's not clear. I like when the King James gives me something that doesn't make sense either in English. That way it's sort of like, okay. Because he covers his face with fatness. And what would I say about it? Well, what does that mean, Paul? I think what it's saying is, God is going to run on him, on his neck. That's your vulnerable spot. And on the thick bosses of your bucklers, if that's what it means, they're saying it's like, it's like he runs at them with a shield. I'm like, okay, maybe. He runs on his neck as one with a shield. That's often used as like, someone hits you with a shield in the neck. That's pretty, coming at you with a shield to the neck. That could be a decapitation threat there. But also, it could be the idea of falling upon, your strength, meaning the Lord striking at the strength of the wicked means that he loses his protection, if the Lord strikes his shield. Because he covers his face with his fatness and maketh collops of fat on his flanks. There's another wonderful turn of phrase. Though his face is covered with fat and his waist bulges with flesh, he will inhabit ruined towns. Again, the King James just outdoing itself here. Collops of fat. It says collops of fat are collops. Which for me is amusing because I don't know what collops are. I suppose collops are I think collops are, like it says collops of fat on his flanks. I think this is, well, it doesn't mean this, but it's the word we usually use is, I think, rolls. Rolls of fat, okay? He's got rolls of fat on his face. Or wait, where was the rolls of fat? Rolls of fat are never a good look, right? We want to try to be fit. I said, I think a lot of the foods we've been eating are destructive to our health. And so, cut out the things that are poisoning us. And I think, there may be at least a much reduced obesity problem. I remember for years I was struggling because it was like, it didn't seem like I ate a whole lot. He runneth upon him, upon his neck. Okay. Because he covers his face with fatness and maketh collops of fat on his flanks. And he dwelleth in desolate cities and houses which no man inhabiteth, which are ready to become heaps. What does it mean because he covers his face with fatness? Well, I suppose that's going to be some sort of metaphor, right? And the idea that, the wicked is feeding himself and becoming fat with it's one thing to become fat with food. It's a personal struggle, right? That's we don't want to be like that. We want to have fit bodies, right? so we can serve the Lord optimally and live a long life and serve the Lord all the days of our life. But it's one thing to be fat with stolen money from other people. You know what I mean? To be a fat cat, you know what I mean? In that sense of like to be fat, but not in the sense of literally. And so that's what it means. He's using this idea of literal fatness to talk about how the wicked make themselves fat through wickedness. You know, because when you fatten yourself like that, you know, what he's saying is like that is the Lord causes the Lord to come at someone because it displeases him. He dwells in desolate cities, in houses which no man inhabiteth, which are ready to become heaps. He shall not be rich, neither shall his substance continue, neither shall he prolong the perfection thereof upon the earth. He's never going to get to the end of his works. He will not depart out of darkness. See, that's why I know that's weird, because first it says, he believeth not that he shall return out of darkness. But then it says, he believeth not that he return out of darkness. And it says, he shall not depart out of darkness. That's interesting. He doesn't believe he will depart out of darkness. But maybe this means in a different sense. You know, is he using the same word to now in a different sense? Like the darkness of grave, the darkness of condemnation, the darkness of judgment. The flame shall dry up his branches. You know, the flame dry up your branches? I think that's whatever the opposite of a hyperbole would be, an understatement. You know, by emphasis by understatement. Flame shall dry up his branches, all right. And by the breath of his mouth shall he go away. You know, a lot of times our tongue is our own undoing. And many criminals, that's the truth. Again, misapplied to Job. And also not universally so. Let not him that is deceived trust in vanity. For vanity shall be his recompense. And when you trust in vanity, you're going to get vanity. Not untrue, again. That's the problem is when you're deceived, you don't often understand the things you're trusting in are not trustworthy. So here, all weird. And so we put our trust in things that are not trustworthy. And we get a recompense of having trusted things that are not, we shouldn't have trusted. It shall be accomplished before his time, and his branch shall not be green. His branches are going to be dried up, not green, not new, not growing. He shall shake off his unripe grape as the vine, and shall cast off his flower as the olive. Meaning like when things don't go well. Sometimes fruits, you have something bad happen and the fruits fall before they're ripe. For the congregation of hypocrites, and that's the idea that the purposes of the wicked should not become ripe. They're stopped. They never get to full fruition. They never get to perfection, to perfect their evil ideas, because God doesn't allow it. He makes the congregation of the hypocrites desolate. And the tabernacles of the bribery, they're consumed by the fire of God, because God is righteous. He wouldn't allow such things. They conceive mischief and bring forth vanity, and their belly prepareth deceit. They do, and oftentimes they do reap the consequences, but not always, and that's why that's what requires us to somewhat have faith and trust in God that He will ultimately bring justice to the world, which I do. Ultimately, there will be justice, and we can trust in that. Okay, that's the end of our study. We're going to pick up in chapter 16 tomorrow. Until then, remember, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, and He is the fulfillment of the law.
I have a long time holding my peace. I have been still and refrain myself. Now I will cry like a woman in labor. I will destroy and devour at once. I will make waste mountains and hills and dry up all the herbs. And I will make the rivers islands, and I will dry forsake them. They shall be turned back. They should be greatly ashamed that trusted